Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have our special guest, Rich Bechard, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and former president of the NIAAA. Welcome to the podcast, Rich.
Thanks, Mark. Just feel privileged to be able to sit here and visit with you today.
Let's have you begin by sharing where you grew up, where you went to college, where your first job was.
Well, I actually grew up in small town Western Kansas. I think I had 28 in my graduating class, and that was one of the larger classes to go through that school. But there was about 350 people in the little town of Grinnell, Kansas, clear out in Western Kansas, and did everything I could in high school. Played baseball, played basketball, played football, ran track and field, and was fortunate enough after I graduated from high school to play a little junior college basketball. And actually, when I headed to college, my plans were to be a fish and game biologist. I was an outdoorsman. I loved to fish and hunt, and that was where a lot of passion was. And my sophomore year in college, I can remember a basketball coach kind of visiting with me and said, I really think you would make a great coach. And I admired this coach so much that I started to think about that after I left junior college then and headed to a four-year college, which was Fort Hays State University in Western Kansas.
Okay.
I decided, you know what? I was not playing basketball anymore. I was done. And I thought this is a way to stay connected with sports. It was such a big part of my life growing up. And I remembered what that coach had told me. So I changed my degree at that point, got into education, and ended up graduating from Fort Hays and about 30 miles north of Hays with a small school, Stockton, Kansas. And I started my career at Stockton High School as a assistant football coach, head basketball coach, and head track coach, coached 3 sports. And so that's where my career started. So I taught and coached for 10 years from like 1980 to 1990. And about the 6th or 7th year of my teaching, the principal walked in one day and he says, I need somebody to do some scheduling, to do some AD work. And he said, doesn't pay anything and you're not going to get any time off, but would you think about doing that? And so I said, absolutely, because I admired this principal very much. And so I started doing scheduling and kind of management type things as an AD. And I want to say in January of that first year, I got this letter in the mail talking about this Kansas Athletic Directors Conference. So I went into the principal and says, hey, I know I'm not getting paid. I said, but are you okay if I go to this conference? He said, absolutely, you can go to that. So I went to that first conference and I was so fired up when I got home. I told my wife, I'm going to get my administrative degree and I'm going to be an athletic director. I'm going to, so that's what I did. And in 1990, I got my first job at Holton High School, which is in eastern Kansas, north of Topeka. And I stayed there for 16 years, got highly involved, and went from there to Blue Valley School District, which is one of the larger districts in Kansas, as a district athletic director. And I was a district athletic director there at Blue Valley for 8 years. And had an opportunity to cross the state line about 20 miles from my house at Lee Summit. They were looking for a new district athletic administrator. So I was able to retire in Kansas, and I went over there, and I was a district AD in Lee Summit, Missouri for 8 years. So, and I retired from that position about 2.5 months ago. So
That's awesome.
that's in a nutshell, that's the career right there.
That's great. I've got a few follow-up questions that shows my ignorance of the Kansas topography. I'm assuming Fort Hays State is in Hays, Kansas.
Yes.
Okay, I got that right.
Yep.
From Hays, Kansas, because I've been through Hays just once. Grinnell, east or west of Hays?
So Grinnell would be west of Hays, 75 miles, right on I-70. So if you drove on I-70, you went by Grinnell, but it's right by the tree. So
okay, so if I remember right, I'm driving to Kansas. It's pretty much flat. I pretty much am on cruise control, but about 2/3 of the way across the state, it kind of juts up northwest for 5 or 10 miles and then goes straight again. So
yeah,
is it before it juts up or after?
Just prior to that, about 10 miles prior to where it juts up would be where Grinnell is. So yeah, that it juts up between Oakley and Colby out there in western Kansas. So
that's awesome. And then another follow-up question. Lee Summit, I'm trying to think, whose place did you take place? Who did you replace when you went to Lee Summit?
The legend in Missouri, Darwin Rolled.
Okay, and that's where my question went, because Darwin was an acquaintance of mine, might have been before I met you.
Yeah.
During our board days.
Yes.
So,
yeah, Darwin was probably the most well-known athletic administrator in the state of Missouri. It was a lot of people ask me, are you concerned about trying to follow Darwin Rolled? I said, absolutely not. I'm excited because I know everything's in great shape and in place, and I've been doing it the right way. So it was just a great situation to walk into.
You didn't feel like Gene Barstow at UCLA replacing Wooden then?
Not quite, but
okay.
Darwin and I, we got together once a month. We still try to get together whenever we can, but he was a great resource for me, especially through that first year, because he was like a history book, not only in Lee Summit but the state of Missouri. So
sure. Well, my goodness, I think I knew him way back when I first got involved with the awards committee. I can't remember if he was on it or not, but I met him. And so probably the first Missourian I knew, before Josh Scott, before McGurk, before Marty O'Hearn, before the rest of them.
Right.
Let's have you talk. Yeah. Let's have you talk for a moment about some of the mentors in your life and some of the inspiration that they gave you.
Well, as you know, the coaches all along the way, I was really fortunate that I felt like I had quality coaches through high school, through college, people that I wanted to be like, that had a positive impact on my life. So, clearly, I think most people that play athletics have a coach impact them, hopefully in a positive way. And I think that's a big reason to get in athletic administration, because I wanted other athletes in high school, middle school, to have the experience I had. As an athletic administrator, when I went to that first conference, there was one AD that really caught my eye, and his name was Art Newcomer. And Art was clearly a mentor and a great example. And it was not like that he gave me a lot of information, and I know he did from time to time, but it was just by his example. I can remember he at a state conference. I mean, here's one of the person who started the KIAAA in Kansas and started the NIAAA founding father of both the state and national organization. And he would sit down with anybody, and I can remember my second year as an AD, and he sits at the table and just strikes up a conversation. I couldn't wait to get back to my room to tell my wife, "You're not going to believe who I talked to today. I talked to Art Newcomer," and
Wow.
so he was a big time mentor for me, and just a great example of, I felt like, what should be done as an athletic administrator. And early in my when I became a full-time AD, in Holton, I had a couple of ADs in the league, one named Marvin Kohlmeyer, who was actually on the board of directors for a couple of years, and then he got out of athletic administration, so he was replaced. But I had him on speed dial. And so Marvin, clearly he was up there at Sabetha, Kansas, and he was a tremendous mentor. And there was another AD over at Nemaha Valley named Jerry Odom, and we're still great friends to this day. And another AD that really, what impressed me early on in my career was an AD, Mike Carl, who was out of Hayes, Kansas. So there's 2 or 3 very impactful people in my career, as well as just like I said, Art Newcomer was probably the one that I remember the most, that kind of made me feel like I really wanted to get involved, because I knew he was highly involved. And so there's a few.
You talk about Art. I mean, I knew Art obviously not as well as you, but Art's one of those guys. Art, Dave Martins, those guys that go way. I mean, they're legends in the NIAAA, and obviously in Kansas, Art was. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Let me ask you this question. You've been an AD for over 30 years. How's it changed from you in 1990? How's the job of AD different than it was when you just retired in 2022?
When I first started as an athletic administrator, I and maybe most new ADs are this way, I'm not sure, but I was overwhelmed with the management side, and did not have the resources. There was no LTI, no classes to take. There was a state conference, and I was fortunate enough in my district, even though it wasn't a large district, they wanted me to go to a national conference. They said, "We want you bringing back the latest and greatest." And so those 2 opportunities were there, but that, you didn't have podcasts like what we're doing now. You didn't have access to information like we do now. I can pretty much get on the internet or the NIAAA website and pull up anything, a strategic plan that somebody did a presentation on, or time management somebody did a presentation on, and just there's so much more right now to help you, what I feel like, on the leadership side. And I feel like 99% of my position was just being a management person when I first started. And when I retired, I feel like that was more 50-50 with leadership and management. And so just the access to information and being connected, I think is a huge, huge difference. So that's probably the one thing that I would say is totally different than it was 42 years ago.
Yeah, I'm sure. Let's have you talk along those same lines. Then I want you to speak to the issue to those of our listening audience here in Utah and across the nation who may not have taken advantage of the chance to be certified, and how important that would be, and your observations about certification.
Well, I think certification, the biggest thing is I believe certification is good for the student athletes in my school district, because if I'm better, everybody else is going to be better. And I believe that the one thing I still can remember one of my coaches saying, "Stay green and grow." And being certified, I think, is a commitment to growth personally and professionally. And I think, just making that commitment is a great example to your coaches, is a great example to your parents and your athletes, that you think enough of your profession that you're going to get certified, just as a doctor or a lawyer or a master teacher or whatever, and the certification program the NIAAA has is second to none. It's certified, nationally certified. So it's highly quality stuff. And I think once you get rolling with it, it just gets in your blood. You just almost can't get enough of it. I can remember when the LTI classes first started coming out, they pretty much did them before and after the national conference. I mean, so you came early and you stayed late to try to get classes in, and I just couldn't get enough of that. But I would highly recommend people getting certified. I have a son in athletic administration now, so hopefully he's looking at taking his CAA at the national conference this year. So
that's awesome. For you listeners out there, again, across the nation and here in Utah, listen to the words of a wise veteran about certification. If you haven't taken that opportunity to become certified, I would also echo what Rich said and have you check into it and get that done. Let's talk about the journey with your state association. In your case, 2 state associations, your journey with Kansas, your journey with Missouri, and then, of course, we'll begin with your journey with the NIAAA after that.
Yeah, of course, the majority of my career was in Kansas. Like I said, I went to that first state conference when I wasn't even a full-time AD. I was just doing it on the side, so to speak. And I went to that first one, and I don't think I missed one since. So I probably, even when I was on the Missouri side, I went to the Kansas conference just as a past president and had some duties there and things. But so I started going to the conference, and after a few years, there was an opening on the board of directors. So I ran for that position and become a board member. And so I spent some time on the board of directors, which was a really exciting time for me. And once I was on the board for a number of years, I made the commitment to try to run for president, and went ahead and ran for that and was elected president. So that was another special year for me. So I was fortunate enough to do a couple of things that are still pretty impactful today. When I was a assistant principal athletic administrator, we had a teacher that won the Horizon Award. In other words, it's an up and coming teacher, like a first, second year teacher that has extreme promise, and they get this award, and you go to Topeka, and there's, I don't know how many of them that get this award. So I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And so I thought about, why don't we do that for athletic administrators? So I brought that to the board of directors and said, I'd like to start this beginning AD award, so to speak. Well, when you got a guy that's a legend in your state named Art Newcomer, it was pretty easy to name the award the Newcomer Award. So we started that, and it's been really a successful thing, and quite an honor for people to get that award. And then the other thing, many years ago, I had a AD friend called Jack Dressler, who is the AD at Wellsville, Kansas. And he called me and says, hey, we're going to start a scholarship program for kids in Kansas through the KIAAA. He said, would you mind writing some criteria for it? So I sat down with my school counselor and I said, you know, here's some things that I really want in this, but I need your help. So we sat down a couple, 2, 3 days. But one of the things I wanted in that was an essay on how athletics have impacted my life. And so anyway, to make a long story short, Larry Munskard was the president of the NIAAA, and he come to Kansas to our conference, and we had the award winners come in, and Larry was so impressed with what we were doing with these scholarships and these kids and their speeches, so to speak. He took it back to the NIAAA, and now that has become the scholarship program for it. Now the NIAAA is basically exactly what I come up with many years ago in my office with a counselor. So every time I see these kids up there at the national conference reading their essays, I think back to, that's pretty cool that that was a thought I had many years ago and what it evolved into. And I'm thinking I believe there's some other states that have kind of followed suit with that as well. But so that was kind of a couple of neat things that happened to develop in my time with the KIAAA. Taught lots and lots of classes. Got to Missouri, and you know, I'd done so much in Kansas. I kind of just took a back seat in Missouri. I taught classes. I did some workshops, but as far as getting in any leadership roles, I just felt like there's ADs, young ADs that need to get in those roles, and so I didn't seek anything there. Did some sportsmanship summits and things like that. So
thank you for sharing that. Let me follow up with a question. The scholarship program, I had no idea that that's where the start of the national program came from, because we started one in Utah, and of course it's modeled after the NIAAA model, which is modeled after the Kansas model.
right.
So we thank you, and so that's just an extra thank you for that. I want to talk about your time on the NIAAA board, and to start it off, I know you've got a couple stories maybe you want to share, but I have one in particular, and some of the people in this story have been on the podcast, and I have asked this question of them when they're on the podcast. So your question is, talk about when you were on the board. So I think you were the president-elect, maybe? At this,
was president-elect
in Indianapolis, and
yes,
we'll just say that a few people who shall remain nameless somehow made their way onto the Lucas Oil Field. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, that was a great evening. We had the president's reception over at Lucas Field up in some quarterback club room. I can't remember. The interesting thing of that is we're there in December, and the Super Bowl is happening there that year.
Yeah.
And so me and some friends, one of my friends from Utah, by the way, within that group, decided that we wanted to go down onto the field. So we make our way down there, and Annette, the president, is, I guess I shouldn't mention names, but I think everybody's probably, there's so many pictures of this out there that I don't think it's a secret anymore. But we got out on the field, and we were taking pictures, and all of a sudden here comes security and yelling at us, "What are you doing?" And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, here's the NIAAA board leadership. We're going to get hauled off, carried off. So the gal was yelling at us, and I just yelled back. I said, "We're just checking our seats for the Super Bowl. We're down here, I think, on the front row." And she didn't appreciate that at all. And so we ended up getting out of there. But it was just a fun thing that I think grows bigger every year when we talk about it. But
well, I may mention that that lady that was raising her voice at us may have been the same lady that was greeting the people as they came off the elevator on the main level who possibly instructed someone from Utah, no, there's no way you can go down on the field. Of course, I went back up the elevator, so we'll just leave it at that. But share some of your other memories when you were on the board.
You know, probably one of my fondest memories was my first year on the board. You know, you don't, as you know, when you're first year on the board, you kind of sit back and you're just taking it all in. You're so impressed with the people in the room. You're thinking, oh my gosh, you know, how did I end up here? You know, with people at like you, and you know, and you're in a room with Mike Blackburn and Bruce Whitehead and Holly Farnese, and you know, just Daryl Nance, Sam Rasmussen, Annette Scoggin, just Phil Risen. You know, it goes on and on. But the one person I sat next to over in the corner was Jerry McGee. And so I sat by Jerry, and I told my wife after the first couple of board meetings that I said, I feel like I'm sitting next to like an art newcomer. I mean, the history that Jerry had, and what an honor that was to spend a year sitting next to him. And I think I cherish probably that as much as anything, you know, that just sitting next to him and listening to some of the things that he would say. But there, you know, just the board meetings. One thing that really sticks out in my mind is, you know, everybody becomes so close when they're on the board. I mean, you're like brothers and sisters. And when you head to the airport, you know, you're given hugs and kisses and everything else, and saying goodbye to people. And I can remember walking into the terminal in Indianapolis, and we're all, you know, headed our separate ways. And a guy standing there says, what are you guys all about? You know, I said, well, we're just athletic administrators from all across the country that are on the board of directors together. And we just really cherish each other and value each other. He said, man, I wish I could work in an environment like that. And that's always stuck with me, that how special that is. But my time on the board was absolutely phenomenal. Just the people I crossed paths with and became friends with, you know, you're lifelong. Then it's a kind of a, you know, I don't ever want to compare it to like going to war at all, but you know, Army buddies are buddies for life. And I think when you're on the board with somebody, it's especially your classmates that came on the same time you did, it's kind of a connection that you'll have forever. So it was really special. And I just felt so fortunate to have that opportunity, because not everybody has that opportunity, and there's so many deserving people that would be quality board members.
No question, and thank you for sharing that. And I've talked quite a bit to the guests I've had on the show about the NIAAA family, and I think what you said sums it up. So thank you for sharing that. Let's have you talk about any memories you had as the president, because as rare as it is to get on the board, it's even rarer to be able to serve as the president. So any observations or memories from when you were the president?
Well, the first one's shock that I was even was elected by the board. But, you know, when you sit in that room, there's not a person in that room that's not deserving of sitting in that chair. So it was really a tremendous, tremendous honor. You know, just going to section meetings, meeting other athletic administrators around the country, and knowing that, you know, the West Coast and the East Coast and the Midwest, you know, there's a different flavor all across the country, different challenges. But what I noticed was that the commitment of doing what's right for their student athletes was the same no matter where I went, you know, and so there were some great experiences. One of the, I got to share, you know, I was the president when it was in San Antonio. And so prior to the business meeting, I had this notebook, and everything, every one of my little speeches, talks, notes was in this notebook. But I also had it on a flash drive just in case something happened, I lost my notebook or whatever. Well, we get to the we were practicing for the banquet, and then we had to walk down to where the annual meeting was, which I would preside over. And that was a heck of a walk. I mean, it was from one end of the convention center to the other almost.
Mhm.
So I get down there and I open my bag up and my notebook's not in there. And I am in panic, and this thing's going to start in 10, 15 minutes. So I know I had to leave it in the banquet room somewhere. And I got back there to the table and it wasn't laying where I thought it would be. And I thought, how am I going to run this meeting when I don't, all my introductions were on there and everything. So finally I asked somebody, I said, there was a notebook here. He says, oh yeah, was that it over there? And luckily there it laid. So somebody grabbed it and put it on the side. So I grab it and I run back. So I'm getting ready for this meeting. I'm just sweating because I ran back all the way across this convention center. But oh my gosh. So my presidency went really well, especially through the conference, except that one moment when I thought, oh my gosh. So, but 2012 was an extremely special year, one I'll remember forever for two reasons. That was the year my son donated a kidney to me in February, and then being the NIAAA president as well. So pretty special year.
Let me ask you a follow-up back to what you mentioned earlier with your time on the board. You mentioned Jerry McGee, and I think of those times we were in there together, and most of us would say something or at least speak to something when we were asked, and sometime would pipe in otherwise. But there was a couple of people in that room, Jerry McGee and Lawrence Johnson, rest in peace, who's no longer with us. And I can remember if Jerry talked or if Lawrence talked, it just went quiet. Whenever somebody else was talking, you'd whisper back and forth, whatever, and you'd hear what they had to say. But when these two gentlemen talked, it got quiet. So address that.
Yeah, that is spot on, Mark. Lawrence, I can remember him sitting over there on the end in the corner, and that was the old boardroom where we're pretty crowded in there, you know. But he would sit there, arms crossed across the chest, and you could see the wheels turning. And then he'd lean forward a little bit, and when he spoke, it was like somebody would say E.F. Hutton, it just got quiet. Jerry was the same way, he didn't say a lot, but what he had to say was always something you wanted to hear. You wanted to catch what he had to say. And yeah, those were two special people on that board, as well as all of them. But it was amazing. And the two we're talking about are no longer with us. So happy that I crossed paths with them when I did. And I was the lucky one for sure.
Absolutely. I want you to share with our audience your contributions to professional development, which are many, but particularly I want you to talk about the unique opportunity you had to be the chair of the 4 strategic plan. And I know that because obviously somehow you decided you want me to help you. I was one of the sub chairs along with Sam and Holly, but talk about that experience to our people across the nation that possibly haven't been involved in a strategic plan, and maybe this will light a fire under them.
Yeah, the strategic plan was an amazing experience. First of all, I got to spend a lot of time with you and Holly Farnese and Sam Rasmussen, because we met as a leadership group prior to and after we had the main group. But basically, we had 8 people in 3 subcommittees, and that was one person from every section of the United States. And as I look back on that group of people and what those people are doing today in leadership roles in the NIAAA, it's mind-boggling to me, where they're at today. It was such a great group. And Mark Armstrong left, he led the 5th strategic plan. He's from Nebraska. And I remember him calling me. He says, "You got any words of wisdom as I get ready to lead everybody through the fifth?" And I says, "Yeah." I said, "I'm going to be totally honest with you." I said, "The most important people on that strategic plan are your three chairs." And that, for me, that was you and Holly and Sam. And I will go to my grave saying that. And I said, if you got the right people there, all you got to do is coordinate things, be a cheerleader, be a motivator. And what a great experience. But I said, so Mark, the best thing you can do is get everybody started and step back and get out of the way. And I felt like we had great discussions. We even put some people on that committee that maybe were critical of some areas of the NIAAA. And I believe they maybe had a whole different look at things after visiting the office and what actually happens and what is done by just a small group of people, and the volunteers that we have all across the country that do things and don't seek a penny for it and don't think twice about doing it. But it was an amazing experience. And there again, it's a group of people that, what was there, 27 of us, 28 of us, that now it's a connection with those people that we have forever, so.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And once again, for our listeners across the nation, if you haven't been involved, or if your state organization has asked you to get involved in a plan, take advantage of that. Let's shift gears when we finish up here, Rich. Talk about some of the observations from, I was going to say the recent conference in Denver, but it's no longer recent. It was 9 months ago. But talk about that after the Tampa virtual conference and what you're looking forward to when we get to Nashville here coming up.
Yeah, Denver. Well, first of all, I think it gets better every year. I think the conference is, I always tell our people in the state that it's a state conference on steroids. And if you go once, you're probably going to go again. But just the quality of people that are doing presentations and teaching classes. And I mean, if you can't, I can remember when I coached, and even when I was an athletic administrator, but when I coach, I'd always tell my kids, okay, it's 3:00. We need to be better at 5:00. And I would always tell myself when I went to work every day, as I go through my gratitude list and some other things, that, okay, it's 7:00. At 4:00 or 5:00, I need to be better. And if you go to a conference, a national conference, you can't help but be better at 5:00 than you were at 7:00 in the morning. And so just that stay green and grow type attitude. But I really felt like it was a powerful conference, and probably the most valuable conference we've ever had, in the fact that we were just coming off probably the most difficult time in most people's careers.
Well said.
And we hadn't been together for 2 years, so to speak. Our family, our NIAAA family. I know we talked virtually through, and we emailed and we text and we did a lot of those things, but there's nothing like getting with somebody and giving them a hug and sitting down and having coffee or whatever it may be. So I look forward, the one thing I look forward to, Nashville, it will be my first conference as a retired AD. So I still teach 726 with Susan Robbins, at least for another year, which is a fun class to teach. But I will still go to workshops because, regardless of where you're at in your life, whether you're a first-year AD, a 10-year AD, towards the end of your career, or retired, I felt like there's ways you can grow and help other people grow.
Thank you. That is a great observation. Let me go to a place that's not on the questions I asked you. I think it's one of the blessings of NIAAA membership. And I know it's a private thing between you and me and Lee and Lane, but whenever UK is playing basketball, I know we had back and forth when the Utes were in the Rose Bowl last year. I just think that to be able to text back and forth and have a group text and talk about your teams, and obviously there's no AD stuff in there. It's just for fun.
Right.
We're watching games, this and that, but talk about, because my wife always mentions that. Oh, that must be your Kansas friends when my phone beeps when I got a text.
Yes. Yeah. By the way, it's KU, not UK. I'm Rich Bechard, not Phil Rising. So.
Oh no, I misspoke. I meant KU. Because
Yeah,
the Bad Moon Rising,
I know
I didn't
you
mean
did.
UK. I meant
But
Kansas.
yeah,
Yes.
it's really pretty cool because KU's on ESPN a lot, and I know you get it out there, and of course it's earlier in the evening for you,
Right.
but all of a sudden the text between Lee Green, Lane Green, myself, and you are back and forth, and when the Utes play and the Orange Bowl, and actually, my brother's volleyball team there at KU played the Utes the other day
Right.
out there. I was going to come out to see you, but I had some health things going on that I needed to attend to right at that time, some appointments. So I didn't get out there like I was hoping, but we were fortunate enough to win that match against. They were really good. But yeah, that's pretty special. Just to be able to do that. I know every time KU plays Kentucky, I'm probably going to get a text from Phil Rising and Mike McGurk, so just those are things that are, blessings that happen by just the connections you've had through one of the greatest organizations that there is. I'm just trying to think of where you can find what we get somewhere else.
Yeah, and I just don't think you can. So thanks for addressing that. Now that you're retired, looking back, what was the favorite part of your job?
I loved working with coaches and everything, but I really feel like just watching kids compete. I love watching kids compete. And I think through my career of 42 years, I was involved as a coach or athletic administrator in, I believe, over 100 state championships, and
wow,
which is really, really cool. Of course, when you're in a district with 5 schools, you can they stack up quickly sometimes. But and the point I'm trying to make is those were great. They really were. But I think what I enjoyed more than anything is that kid on the end of the bench that comes in the game and hits a 3 or scores or makes a big tackle, or that hardly ever plays, and the excitement on their face and the excitement of his teammates that he did this, that's special. I think that's a part of the job. And you think about all the hard work that went into preparing for a football game or a basketball game, and then everything goes well. It's just really, really good stuff. I can remember we were playing a playoff football game when I was in Holton, and we had to play it in the afternoon because the team came from a long distance. And we had a small stadium. We had to bring in bleachers. There wasn't enough seating, and people got there early. I mean, there was people there at daybreak for a 1 o'clock kickoff, and they had their lawn chairs, and we had lines a mile long. And so we had our student council, they were giving lemonade and cookies to the people. And anyway, this place gets totally packed. It's a beautiful fall afternoon, 65 degrees and sunshine, and huge crowd. And our team won, but it really probably didn't matter. And I can remember it was probably around 4:30, 5 o'clock. Everybody was gone. And I was just sitting down in the bleachers, and there's trash everywhere. Beautiful day. And I just sat there and thought, man, that was good stuff. Great football game. Kids, both teams played well. our team won, and I said, and I'm getting paid for this. I mean, it was just like, I don't care if it's a Saturday, I've given up a Saturday, I can just remember that moment, how special it was. But just watching kids compete, I think, was the most enjoyable part. And having 3 kids of my own, highly involved, that was pretty special too. So got to watch them go through their careers and watch them compete.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great reflection and a great answer. Let's finish up with a couple of questions. The first being, you've got 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator. They need to follow these suggestions in order to become successful. What are your 2 suggestions for this new AD?
I think number one, I've already mentioned it earlier, stay green and grow. Now, how do you do that? You get involved. You go to your state conference. You go to a national conference if you have that opportunity. You take advantage of the leadership classes that are taught. You get connected with other athletic administrators. I would say, grow every day, get connected, and be involved as much as you possibly can, or your district will allow you, in your state organization and the national organization. And the next thing I would tell a young administrator is, the one thing I felt like I really did a good job of in my career was making the people around me feel valued. And I took a lot of pride in that. From the custodian that sweeps your floor to the superintendent in your school and everybody in between, if they need to feel valued by you, whether they're above you, below you, or, and I've always told my assistants that have worked with me, the first thing I set them down, if they were just starting with me or I was just starting with them, I said, let's get one thing straight. You're not working for me, we're working together. And I always treated them that way. And I felt like I had administrative assistants that they could have done my job for real easy. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, but making people feel valued, your athletes, your coaches, your custodians, your principal, your superintendent, I think it's so powerful that then when you need something from a teacher or you need something from a coach or whatever, they're gonna go a lot further feeling valued than they would not feeling valued. So I those are a couple of things that I think would really benefit young ADs, hopefully.
Some great wisdom. Let's finish up with this one, Rich. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask?
I think you did a pretty good job. It was just enjoyable being on here with you. But I was asked what my most disappointing when I retired in Kansas. I had a newspaper guy ask me. He said, "What was your most disappointing thing in your career?" And I said, "Well, that's pretty easy. The most disappointing thing was when a kid had a bad experience in one of our programs." Which it's bound to happen. But I felt worse about that than probably anything else I did in my job. Was I just wanted every kid to have a great experience, and so and I can remember a lot of students that I felt like were going down the wrong path, and I knew if I could just get them out for athletics, they could turn that path around, and many did. But so I would say that if when I was asked what's the toughest part, now if they ask me what was the most toughest thing you went through, I would have to say COVID, but that was
no
not
question
fun.
about that.
Well, I don't think there's anything more difficult than telling a bunch of kids in spring sports you're not going to compete this year.
No question. I can remember that. It's over 2 years ago. So that's some great reflection and some great answers. That wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Rich Bechard, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, former president of the NIAAA. Rich, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Great seeing you.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.